They said it loud enough for everyone to hear. Who invited her? The words cut through the room, echoing over clinking glasses and forced laughter. Jada Mitchell, a black CEO who had clawed her way through walls meant to keep her out, stood frozen for just a moment. She wasn't supposed to be there, not in their eyes, not in that world built on old money and locked doors. But what they didn't know was that she had come with something far greater than an invitation. She had come with power, with truth, and with the kind of determination that could shatter dynasties. In a matter of seconds, the empire these men thought was untouchable would begin to unravel. Before we continue, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Behind that poised smile at the gala was a story most of the room would never imagine. Jada Mitchell's journey had not begun with privilege, nor had doors opened easily for her. She was the daughter of a man who taught her resilience long before the world demanded it. A man whose untimely death became the fire that fueled her ambition. While others leaned on family wealth, Jada built her foundation with restless nights and relentless study. Harvard was not just a school to her, it was a battlefield where she proved again and again that brilliance could silence doubt. On Wall Street, she thrived in an environment designed to push her out, mastering deals and strategies that seasoned executives could barely comprehend. Every setback sharpened her, every dismissal only made her more determined. They thought she was powerless, just another outsider. They thought wrong. She was only getting started. The gala had been humiliating, but the boardroom was far worse. Jada Mitchell sat at the long, polished table, the walls lined with portraits of men who looked nothing like her, each frame a reminder of who had always been allowed in and who had not. Damian Cross wasted no time. His voice cut through the silence, dripping with arrogance as he questioned her decisions, her qualifications, her very right to hold the seat she had earned. Victor Langston, older and far more calculating, nodded along, reinforcing Damian's attacks with carefully chosen words dressed in civility but meant to wound. Their insults were never direct, but Zara Cole, Jada's sharp and loyal assistant, heard them clearly, each coded phrase that carried the weight of exclusion. Yet Jada remained still. Her expression never faltered. Calm, steady, controlled. Because little did they know, every word, every whisper, every insult was being recorded. Outside the glare of the boardroom, Jada Mitchell was already several moves ahead. The insults they hurled in meetings were nothing more than distractions to her, because while Damian Cross and Victor Langston plotted in plain sight, Jada was quietly building her own arsenal in the shadows. At her side was Julian Ward, a legal strategist with a mind as sharp as steel, a man who had no fear of dissecting corruption thread by thread. Together, they began tracing the hidden trails the board had worked so hard to bury. Bribes disguised as donations, embezzlement funneled through shell companies, offshore accounts tucked away in places most people could never find. With every document uncovered, with every transaction exposed, the image of untouchable power began to fade. Slowly, Jada began planting doubts within the very company her enemies thought they controlled. Every empire looks unshakable, until the cracks appear. The attacks were rarely obvious, but they were relentless. In private meetings and public spaces alike, Jada Mitchell was forced to endure 1,000 subtle cuts disguised as professionalism. They excluded her from conversations, shifted meetings without notice, and pretended not to hear her suggestions until a man repeated them. It was the quiet dismissal, the smirk at her presence, the refusal to acknowledge her victories that revealed just how deeply the rot ran within those walls. And when Damian Cross turned his attention to Zara Cole, humiliating her in front of senior staff with a cruel remark about her competence, Jada did not react outwardly. She sat still, her expression unreadable, but inside, she made another mental mark. Every sneer, every slight, every coded insult was carefully catalogued. Because Jada knew something they did not. Power is not only in the victories you win, but in the evidence you collect. For every insult, I collected a receipt. The decision came down in hushed tones and closed doors. Within 72 hours, the board would cast a final vote to push Jada Mitchell out. The countdown had begun, a silent clock ticking in the background of every meeting, every interaction, every breath inside that towering building. To the untrained eye, Jada appeared to stumble. She let small mistakes slip through, allowed Damian Cross and Victor Langston to believe their plan was working, that the walls were closing in on her. But beneath that calm exterior, she was in motion, quietly mobilizing allies, reaching out to those inside the company who had grown weary of corruption. Whispered conversations spread across hallways, cafeteria tables, and late-night calls. Some began to see what the board refused to acknowledge. Jada wasn't an intruder in their empire. She was the future it desperately needed. And when the clock hit 0, the empire would be hers. As the hours slipped away, the mask of control the board wore began to crack. Zara Cole, sharp-eyed and loyal, was digging deeper than anyone suspected. Buried within a maze of documents, she uncovered a file that could not be ignored. Clear evidence linking Damian Cross to illegal lobbying, a trail of transactions and favors traded for influence that could unravel his entire career. It was the kind of scandal that destroyed reputations overnight, the kind of secret that men like Damian paid fortunes to keep hidden. And then came the whispers about Victor Langston, an older scandal lingering just beyond the surface, carefully concealed but beginning to show. Jada Mitchell read every line, studied every hidden detail, and for the first time in weeks, a smile crept across her face. She no longer needed to simply endure their games. I wasn't going to fight them in the shadows anymore. The empire Damian Cross and Victor Langston had built over decades was starting to unravel, not with explosions or grand announcements, but in silence. One by one, their secrets were being stripped away. Emails once buried deep within encrypted servers found their way into Jada Mitchell's hands. Offshore transfers, once invisible, were frozen in mid-motion, their lifelines of power cut without warning. Bank accounts they had used as safety nets were traced, leaving trails of deceit too bold to ignore. Behind the scenes, Julian Ward moved swiftly, filing injunctions that trapped the board in a tightening cage of legal maneuvers. On the surface, the building remained polished and calm, but in closed-door meetings, whispers grew tense. Board members shifted uneasily in their seats, sensing a storm but unable to see its full shape. The walls were closing in, and they didn't even know it. The final board meeting was meant to be Jada Mitchell's downfall. The long oak table gleamed under the lights, and around it sat men who believed the outcome had already been written. Damian Cross leaned back in his chair with a grin that was equal parts arrogance and cruelty. His voice echoed across the room as he mocked Jada openly, dismissing her as a mistake, a temporary seat warmer who had been foolish enough to think she belonged among them. Victor Langston, older but no less vicious, leaned forward, his voice smooth but sharp as he announced the vote. One by one, signatures marked the papers that would seal Jada's fate, stripping her of the power they never wanted her to hold. Jada said nothing. She didn't flinch, didn't protest. She simply reached into her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder, the weight of it heavy against the polished wood. Her voice cut through the silence with precision. "Gentlemen, these are your crimes, and the world is watching." The silence that followed Jada Mitchell's words was broken by the sharp sound of doors swinging open. Federal agents poured into the room, their jackets marked with bold FBI lettering, their presence a declaration that the game was over. Damian Cross shot up from his chair, his face twisted with rage as he shouted accusations of betrayal, pointing fingers at anyone but himself. His voice cracked, no longer filled with power, but desperation. Victor Langston, once the calm and calculating strategist, slumped in his chair as the reality closed in. The pressure he had spent years deflecting finally caved in on him, leaving him pale and speechless. Outside, the media had already gathered, cameras flashing as if history itself was unfolding in real time. Inside, employees who had long been silenced by fear exchanged quiet glances of relief, some even allowing smiles to break through. And as Jada walked out, her head held high. The building that once tried to push her out now stood shaken to its core. But my revenge wasn't complete yet. In the aftermath of the storm, The board was forced to rebuild itself from the ashes. With Damian Cross and Victor Langston stripped of their power and dragged into investigations that would define their legacies forever, the company had to act quickly to stabilize its future. The emergency vote came swiftly, and the decision was unanimous. Zara Cole, once dismissed and humiliated by the very men who claimed to lead, was officially appointed CEO. Her rise was not only symbolic, it was the start of something entirely new. And yet, when the spotlight turned to Jada Mitchell, expecting her to seize the throne she had fought so hard to defend, she simply shook her head. Jada refused the seat because she had never been fighting for their title. Her plans were already bigger, stretching beyond the walls of one corporation. Under Zara's leadership, the company began restructuring, building policies rooted in transparency and inclusivity, a vision that had always been Jada's unspoken dream. Still, deep inside, Jada knew her story with Damian and Victor wasn't fully finished. But I had one final move left for their legacy. With the company reborn and its old rulers disgraced, Jada Mitchell turned her attention to the remnants of Damian Cross and Victor Langston's empire. Their estates, once symbols of untouchable wealth and arrogance, were seized in the aftermath of their downfall. Where their mansions had stood as fortresses of excess, Jada saw something greater. Brick by brick, she transformed those hollow monuments into a community innovation hub, a place where ideas could flourish, where young people could learn skills, dream freely, and build futures untethered by the corruption of the past. On opening day, the gates swung wide not for executives in tailored suits, but for children carrying notebooks, their laughter echoing through halls where deceit had once thrived. It was more than revenge. It was reclamation. They had asked, who invited her? The answer was history itself. Before we end, let me ask you this. If you were in Jada's shoes facing humiliation and betrayal, what would you have done? We would love to hear your thoughts. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos.